Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on AFR Talk. My name is Brian Fisher. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk. Honored and pleased to welcome to our decision maker line a frequent guest here on Focal Point, sort of our guru-S when it comes to all things dealing with Obamacare and healthcare in general. Twila Brase is the president and co-founder of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. She also produces the daily radio commentary Health Freedom Minute, which you hear each day on Focal Point. Twila, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Well, Twila, good to have you back with us. And one of the things I appreciate about what you and your organization does, the Citizens Council for Health Freedom, is you stay right on top of all of the ins and outs of what is going on with Obamacare. And you are now alerting us to another one of these hidden reefs in Obamacare, another way in which freedom is being endangered as Obamacare is being implemented. It has to do with Medicare and Social Security. Kind of walk us through what this latest threat is to our freedom.
Well, I think what your listeners probably don't know, at least that's what I find, is that there are two things about Medicare that should be fairly alarming to anyone who wants to think that they can depend on Medicare. So one of those is that Medicare does not allow the individual to pay cash for care that Medicare denies. So let's just say you have a covered service like a CAT scan or a medication or an orthopedist or whatever, and Medicare says, no, we don't believe that you need that service. Then you might want to take out your pocketbook and say, well, that's fine, but then I'm just going to pay you because clearly I need this service. And the physician cannot take your money. The X-ray facility cannot take your money because it is unlawful for them to take, it would be considered fraud, for them to take your money, for you to pay cash for the care that you need that Medicare is denying. So that's a serious problem in Medicare that most people don't know about. Once you turn 65, your cash is not good when it comes to getting medical services unless you can find a physician that has sworn off Medicare for at least 2 years. So they have to sign an affidavit. They have to go to a lawyer, get an affidavit, sign it, send it to the federal government, and for 2 years they are exempt from having to participate in Medicare, and they have to do that every 2 years.
Now, this is a doctor that has to do this?
That's a doctor, right.
So those are the only doctors that you can go to if you're over 65.
And you want to pay cash.
And you want to pay cash out of your own pocket for your own medical care. Our government does not even allow you to do it unless you can find a doctor that's been completely out of the government system for a minimum of 2 years.
Right, and they have to, I just want to be clear that this is for covered services. So if there are services like cosmetics or whatever that the government chooses not to cover in Medicare, you can pay cash to any doctor, for those services. But these are for covered services. This was put into law in 1997 as a way to prevent them from balance billing. But it's interesting sort of how that got all turned around because your cash, especially as Medicare becomes more and more depleted of funds, you're going to need your cash to pay for care that Medicare is going to deny. So I think that's one of the things that your listeners need to know. The second one, there's a lawsuit on, and that lawsuit was recently petitioned to the U.S. Supreme Court for a hearing. So the plaintiffs want the U.S. Supreme Court to take up the lawsuit, and they're asking them to do so. And that lawsuit is about the fact that the federal government put in a booklet that if you want your Social Security, your earned money that you have paid all your working life, if you want your Social Security, you must stay in Medicare Part A. That's the hospitalization piece. So that means that if you choose to get out of Medicare for whatever reason, then they can deny you access to your Social Security, deny you access to your income that you're getting after age 65 or, whatever age that it begins for you. So there is a lawsuit that has been denied twice, and now they're asking the U.S. Supreme Court to hear it. And one of its plaintiffs is very well known by probably a lot of your listeners, and that is Dick Armey, who was former Majority Leader of the House.
Yes. Now, talk to us, Twila, about how this rule has gotten enacted. I mean, Was this something that Congress did? Did Congress say we want this? Did the elected representatives of the people, did our elected representatives enact this? Is there a congressional law that says if you opt out of Medicare, you lose your Social Security benefits? Is that how this came about?
No, that's not how it came about. The department just wrote it in a book that's a procedural manual, and they just wrote it there, and that well, they follow it as though it is the law, but it hasn't gone through rulemaking. You know, the interesting thing about law is there is law, and that is what the legislature or Congress passes, and the president or the governor signs. And sometimes in that law, it says that the department shall conduct rulemaking or shall figure out rules or processes or whatever through rulemaking. And so they will put out a proposed rule, and then the public gets to comment on it for a certain number of days. Then they make changes to the rule, and finally they finalize the rule. And when that rule is finalized, it now has the full force and effect of law, even though Congress or the state legislature or no one who has been elected ever looked at a word of it or voted yes or no for it. So it becomes part of the law. But this never went through rulemaking. It's not a law. It's not a rule. Never went through rulemaking. They just wrote it in a procedural manual having to do with Medicare and Social Security, and it has been used as though it were part of the law.
So in effect, then, what you have here, Twila, is you have these bureaucrats through this rulemaking manual called the Program Operations Manual System. You have these bureaucrats in cubicles somewhere in Washington, D.C., without any public input, review, comment, without any sort of direction or direct authorization from Congress. They're in a position now where they can deny people all of their Social Security benefits that they paid into for their entire working life. Is that an exaggeration, or is that right?
No, that is not an exaggeration, and it even goes beyond that. If you have used any Medicare or Social Security benefits at the time that you choose to take yourself out of Medicare, then you are required to pay them back to the federal government. So how do you like that? Here you have worked your whole life, or whatever part of life, and a portion of your income has been taken out and has been promised to you to be your retirement income. And now they say, well, if you're not in Medicare, you can't have your income, and if you use any of it, you have to pay the federal government back.
You know, and that, I've talked often, Twila, about the fact that if the central government takes money from us for purposes which they are not authorized by the Constitution to take, then it's not even taxation. It's just a form of legalized plunder. And that sounds exactly like what this is, where they're plundering someone of everything that's been taken from them for Social Security without any kind of due process, without any sort of constitutional or even authorization from a law of Congress. Right.
Well, it means that everyone who is age 65 and over is required to be in the government program. So whatever happens politically, whatever kind of cuts they make in Medicare, whatever kind of decisions they make about what kind of care is available or isn't, whatever price they might charge you to be Medicare, it is not inexpensive, despite what some people think. It actually costs a lot of money. So all of those things you have to do, or you will lose your Social Security.
And that seems like it's a pretty huge step. I mean, that's basically a huge step toward single payer then. I mean, essentially what Medicare is a single payer system virtually now. Am I right about that? And furthermore, now they've set this thing up so they can start messing with your retirement if you don't comply.
Right. Medicare we look at it as a single payer system for the senior citizens. And when it was put into place in 1965, I believe that those who put it into place, they were very much proponents of a single-payer system, and they looked at this as the way to get it all started. And truly, Medicare is the elephant in the room. It is what controls everything that happens in healthcare. Whatever happens in Medicare, whatever kinds of decisions about what's covered and what isn't and how payments are done, Medicare rules when it comes to healthcare. So for those who wanted it to lead to single payer, it more and more and more is leading that direction by virtue of the fact that it is so big and so controlling. And now, as your listeners have found out, it doesn't allow you actually to get out of it. And 77 million baby boomers are about to come into it. Now, I think your listeners might like to know that we have a one-sheet piece of paper on our website that talks about the 17 facts about Medicare. So these are 2 facts, but I think they might be surprised about the 15 other ones that they would find there.
And tell us, Twila, how they can get to your website and get that information.
They can go to www.cchfreedom.org, cchfreedom.org. And while they're there, they could sign up for our e-news. Just click and put in their information, and we'll send it and keep them, involved and engaged and informed about what is happening in healthcare today with Obamacare and Medicare and all those different issues which will impact their lives.
Our guest on our Decision Maker line has been Twila Brase. She's the president and co-founder of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. You hear her daily commentary, Health Freedom Minute, right here on Focal Point. You can get more information by going to cchfreedom.org. Again, Twila, thanks again for taking time to be with us. I appreciate all the good work you do and the research, the information you bring to us and this listening audience. Very valuable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Twila Brase, the president and co-founder of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Now, when we come back, got a few more sound bites we're going to play. We got Jennifer Granholm. Again, this was probably the speech of the night. In fact, this is the speech of the week as far as I was concerned at the Democratic National Convention. We'll play an excerpt from that. It'll remind you of somebody, and we'll play the sound bite that it reminds you of. We also have Geronimo, the great-grandson of Geronimo, confronting Elizabeth Warren about her claim to be Cherokee. We'll play that sound bite, and we'll hear what Democratic delegates think about banning corporate profits. Number to call if you want to join the program in the last quarter hour, 888-589-8840. That's 888-589-8840. Back in 2.
If we could